Located 30 minutes from the capital of the Magnolia State is a city that's been dubbed the movie capital of Mississippi. The place that I'm speaking of is Canton. Canton, Mississippi has been the site for a lot of feature films, starting in 1995 with The Time to Kill, followed up by My Dog Skip, and then in the year 2000 with Brother, Where Art Thou? Films that capture the hearts of viewers and the attention of America. Outside of being a hub for filmmaking, Canton, Mississippi is 71% safer than other U.S. cities. It's a perfect place to raise a family, but a tight-knit community doesn't shield you from the dangers of the world, especially when the culprit is close to you. August 7th, 1996. The world would make way for Pheonecia Ratliff. She would be born to a father, Fitzgerald Otto, and a mother, Suzanne Ratliff. The place she called home was Canton, Mississippi, a small town that hosts just under 11,000 people. This would be the place that she would begin to grow and learn all about life. Pheonecia is described as a person who was honest, reliable. If you were having a bad day and you were down and out, her cheerful personality would most likely bring a smile upon your face. Outside of being a great friend or family member, she was also very ambitious. She was diligent. She knew the importance of setting goals and then reaching those goals. After completing the early years of her education, she would ultimately graduate from Canton High School and then afterwards head off to Jackson State University. In the year of 2019, Pheonecia would be 22 years old. During the journey of achieving higher education, she would bring another life into this world, a daughter. She would open her eyes and take her first breath in November of that year. Pheonecia had this child with a long-term boyfriend, a boyfriend whom she'd met in high school, a guy who goes by the name of Jamarcus Black. Up until the point of Pheonecia's pregnancy, everything had been okay. But once she was pregnant, things in the relationship began to change. What was meant to be a happy moment would quickly turn sour. Upon finding out that they had conceived a child, Jamarcus would accuse Pheonecia of trying to trap him with the baby. But to add insult to injury, Jamarcus didn't want the child, and he would rather Pheonecia visit a clinic. Needless to say, Pheonecia didn't follow through with this request, and upon her daughter entering this world, she would become her entire life. However, the arrival of her daughter didn't make things better between her and Jamarcus. He would begin using their daughter as a means to control her. He would use her as a pawn. An example of this would be them in an argument. If they were at odds, Jamarcus would take the baby to his father's house, sometimes days at a time. He would remain there at his father's home with the child, keeping her from Pheonecia until he deemed her behavior acceptable, or in other words, cave to his needs. Although everything wasn't great in their relationship, Pheonecia was trying her best to make it work for their child's sake. But the fight for their relationship was one-sided. It seems as if she was the only one trying, because her boyfriend Jamarcus was doing no more than trying to control her. Pheonecia, again, was a very diligent person. She was still in school. She didn't let the baby stop her from completing her education. However, her boyfriend Jamarcus didn't like it. He would often tell her that she's been in school too long and try and persuade her to quit. But him being angered by her being in school didn't affect her because she had a child and she wanted to complete her education. That way she could give her daughter the best life possible. But sadly, these weren't their only problems. He would often follow her around in his car. He would go up to Jackson State to her school and check inside of her classrooms just to see if she's there. He would also follow her to a job, walk inside her place of employment, and start arguments. And on some occasions, he would even climb through the front window of her home in order to watch her inside of her sleep. By the beginning of spring of the year 2020, Pheonecia had had enough, and she would break things off with Jamarcus. Breaking up with Jamarcus means he couldn't control her anymore. However, they did still have a daughter. Following the breakup, Jamarcus would begin demanding that he receive full custody of the child. But at this moment of time, Pheonecia felt like she was the best fit for her daughter, so she wasn't giving him full custody, but he was allowed to see her. But he was very adamant that he wanted his daughter to himself, and he would raise this argument every time he got a chance. April 28th, 2020. It would be a normal day for Pheonecia. At this moment of time, she was juggling a lot. She was still in school, but she also worked 2 jobs. She worked at Walmart and Subway. On this day, she would be scheduled to work at Subway, so she goes to work. But shortly after arriving at work, through the door walks Jamarcus, brandishing a firearm. He then tells Pheonecia that if she didn't do what he wanted within a week and give him the baby, he would finish it for her. But on this day, by fate, it just so happened that a police officer would be passing the Subway in which she was employed, so she would go outside and flag him down. Upon alerting the authorities, Jamarcus Black would be arrested. He would be booked into the Canton County Jail on charges of domestic violence and felony stalking. His bond for these charges would be set at a mere $15,000, and you only need 10%, which means he only needed $1,500 to walk the streets again. Due to the bond being set so low, he would be able to make it, and by May 11th of 2020, he would post that bond. Upon being released, he was informed that he was to have no contact with Pheonecia Ratliff. However, he immediately attempts to contact her, but she's not responding. And as the days begin to pass, he begins to become more agitated. May 14th, 2020. On this evening, 23-year-old Pheonecia Ratliff would be returning from working the late shift at Subway. As normal, whenever Pheonecia worked the late shift, her mother would stay up and wait on her on the porch just to make sure she makes it inside safe. But before Pheonecia could reach the porch, from behind a tree, out comes Jamarcus Black with a firearm in his hand. He then begins to try and force Pheonecia inside of his vehicle. However, on this night, standing on the porch with Pheonecia's mother was also her younger 21-year-old sister. And when she sees this happening, she attempts to stop him. He then turns the weapon on Pheonecia's sister and then shoots her inside of the thigh. After committing this act, he would continue to force Pheonecia inside of his vehicle, and then he flees the scene. After he's left the scene, police and paramedics are called, and luckily, Pheonecia's sister would survive this altercation, and the authorities would be alerted that Pheonecia had been kidnapped. Upon learning this information, they would immediately spring into action. They would begin combing the area, searching for Jamarcus's vehicle. However, they couldn't find it. Hours would pass with no word from Pheonecia until around 6 a.m. on May 15th of 2020. It would be around this time that Jamarcus would call Pheonecia's mother, and then he would demand that she take the baby to his aunt's house. Upon receiving this request, Suzanne Ratliff was reluctant. However, she felt if she did what he asked, he might release Pheonecia. So she gets up at 6 a.m. and she drives to Jamarcus's aunt's home. And then she hands the baby off to his mother. After dropping the baby off, Suzanne Ratliff would then go home and prepare herself for work. She describes that at this moment of time, it wasn't much she could do, and she still had responsibilities. So she would prepare herself and head to work. At this moment of time, it has now been several hours since the last contact with Pheonecia or Jamarcus. However, around noon of that day, she would receive a call. This phone call would be from her daughter Pheonecia. In this phone call, Pheonecia is distraught and she's crying. She then tells her mother that she wanted her to know that she loves her and the entire family. And then the call abruptly ends. Shortly after receiving this phone call, the authorities would reach out to Pheonecia's mother and give her the news. However, it wasn't the news she wanted. They had located Pheonecia and Jamarcus, but when they located them, they were both deceased. Jamarcus had shot Pheonecia once inside of the head and then turned the weapon on himself. The authorities were able to recover the location because they were tracking his cell phone. And after being missing for roughly 12 hours, they would both be found dead inside of his vehicle.
Friends and family met to honor and remember Pheonecia Ratliff. Yesterday, the Jackson State University student was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend, who then turned the gun on himself.
I invited you guys today in remembrance of my daughter Pheonecia Marquita Renee Ratliff. Whew. May 15th is a day I will forever remember. That day in 2020, it changed my life forever. Life was taken from her by the hands of a guy she thought loved her. No parent wants to hear the news. Their child has passed away. But to get the news that your child was shot in the head and died in seconds, it's the most devastating news a parent can ever get. To hear my daughter tell me in her last voices that she loved me, and to tell all y'all how much she loved y'all, showed me she was strong, even in her last minutes on earth. Y'all heard the saying, may the life you live speak for you. Well, I don't have to tell y'all, go deep into that, because everybody out here knew Pheonecia, and y'all knew she was loved. So with all that being said, in honor of her, I want us to release these blooms, that they may fly to the sky, where I truly believe deep in my heart that my daughter resides. I love you, Pheonecia, and I love you wherever you will in my heart. I want to count to 3, release. 1, 2, 3. I love you, Nisha.
Love you, Nisha.
Yesterday was a lot. I turned my phone off, and today has been better because we have been together. It makes it seem as if she's still here with us because we're living off her memories. She was a very determined young lady. She was a very influential young lady, even to her sisters and even to myself. She never gave up easily, and she loved us, just as we loved her. And now it's just so hard right now, to even accept this, knowing that she was one of the innocent ones, She was so innocent, she was so sweet, and she was always to herself.
or I shall live your epitaph to make, or you survive when I in earth am rotten. From hence your memory death cannot take, although in me each part will be forgotten. Your name from hence immortal life shall have, though I once gone, to all the world must die. The earth can yield me but a common grave, when you entombed in men's eyes shall lie. Your monument shall be my gentle verse, which eyes not yet created shall o'erread, and tongues to be your being shall rehearse when all the breathers of this world are dead. You still shall live. Such virtue hath my pen, where breath most breathes, even in the mouths of men.
What happened to 23-year-old Pheonecia Ratliff is nothing short of tragic. But what is worse in this case is she did everything right. She called the authorities. She alerted them on his behavior. She took out an order of protection. And in the end, it still wasn't enough. After the death of Pheonecia Ratliff, the state itself would begin to take more precaution on domestic violence victims. But it's sad that she had to lose her life to open so many eyes. If you or someone you know are struggling with domestic violence, don't be afraid to reach out for help. The number is 1-800-799-7233. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233. Don't be afraid to reach out. Someone is there to speak with you, to help you along the way. This number is open 24/7 and is completely confidential. Don't be afraid to receive the help. Rest in peace, Pheonecia Ratliff. Thank you for being a light for others.